animated nature. If rationality exists in the world, then it must permeate everything, though manifesting itself variously. We have accustomed ourselves to ascribe animism and rationality in this or that form to those things only that we designate as beings, i.e. to those whom we find analogous to ourselves in the functions which define animism through our eyes. Inanimate objects and mechanical phenomena are to us lifeless and irrational, but this cannot be so. It is only for our limited mind, for our limited power of communion with other minds, for our limited skill in analogy that rationality and psychic life in general manifest only in certain classes of living creatures, alongside of which a whole series of dead things and mechanical phenomena exist. If we could not converse among ourselves, if every one of us could not infer the existence of rationality and of psychic life in another by analogy with themselves, then everyone would consider the self alone to be alive and animated, then relegate the rest of humankind to mechanical dead nature. In other words, we recognize as animated only those beings that have a psychic life which is accessible to our observation in three-dimensional sections of the world, i.e. beings whose psyche is analogous to our own. About other consciousness we do not know and cannot know. All beings whose psyche does not manifest itself in a three-dimensional section of the world are inaccessible to us, and if they make contact with our life at all, then we necessarily regard their manifestation as those of dead and unconscious nature. Our power of analogy is limited to that section in which we interact, and we cannot think logically outside of the conditions of three-dimensional sections. Therefore, everything that lives, thinks and feels in a manner not analogous to our own must appear dead and mechanical. Sometimes we vaguely feel an intense life manifesting in the phenomena of nature, and sense a vivid emotionality, the manifestation of which constitutes the phenomena of, to us, inanimate nature, and behind this phenomena of visible manifestation is felt the noumenon of emotion. In electrostatic and electromagnetic discharge, in thunder and lightning, in the rush and howling of the wind are seen flashes of the sensual nervous shuddering of some gigantic organism. A strange individuality that is all of their own is sensed in certain days. There are times that are absolutely brimming with the marvelous and the mystic, moments having each its own individual and unique consciousness, its own emotions and thoughts. One may almost commune with these and they will tell you that they live a long, long time, perhaps eternally, and that they have known and seen many, many things. In the procession of the year, in the iridescent leaves of autumn with their memory-laden smell, in the first snow frosting the fields and communicating a strange newness and sensitivity in the air, in the spring freshness, in the warming sun, in the awakening but still naked branches through which gleams the turquoise sky, in the white crisp nights of the north and in the dark, humid and warm tropical nights, spangled with stars, in all of these periods are the thoughts, emotions and forms, peculiar to themselves alone of some great consciousness. All this is the expression of emotion, thoughts and forms of consciousness of a mysterious being we call nature. There can be nothing dead or mechanical in nature. If in general life and feeling exist, then they must exist in everything. Life and rationality make up the world. If we consider nature from our perception, from the three-dimensional realm of phenomena, then it is necessary to say that each thing, each phenomena possesses a psyche of its own. A mountain, a tree, a river, the fish within the river, the morning dew, mist, fog and rain, the planet, air and fire, each of these must possess a psyche and a voice of its own. Something recognized through paganism and celebrated in its individuality. If we consider nature from the other side, from the side of noumena, then it is necessary to say that each thing and each phenomena of the world is a manifestation in our section of a rationality that is incomprehensible to us, belonging to another page or level of being. The same having there functions that are incomprehensible to us. In that level of space-time, one rationality is such, and its function is such that it manifests itself here as a mountain, some other manifests as a tree, a third as a river valley or a mangrove swamp, a fourth as a desert plain, and so on. The phenomena of our world are very different from one another. If they are nothing else but manifestations in our section of different rational beings, then these beings must be very different too. Between the psyche of a mountain and the psyche of a man, there must be the same differences as exist physically between a mountain and a man. We have previously admitted the possibility of different existences, where we said that a house exists, that a man exists, and that an idea exists also, but that they all exist differently. If we pursue this thought further, then we shall discover many kinds of different existence. The fantasy of fairy tales, myths and legends making all the world animate, ascribed to mountains, rivers and forests a psychic life similar to that of men. This is, however, just as untrue as the complete denial of consciousness to inanimate nature. Noumena are as distant and as varied as phenomena, which are their manifestations in our three-dimensional realm. Each stone, each grain of sand, each planet and each moon, asteroid or comet has its own noumenon, consisting of life and of psyche, binding them into certain wholes that are incomprehensible to us. The activity of life of separate units may vary greatly, and the degree of the activity of life can be determined from the standpoint of its power to reproduce itself. With inorganic mineral nature, this activity is so obscure or insignificant that units of this nature accessible to our observation do not reproduce themselves, although this only seems so to us because of the narrowness of our view in time and space. We do not see magma rising and volcanoes forming mountain ranges in our lifetimes. However, if our view embraced hundreds of thousands of years and our entire planet simultaneously, then we might witness the growth of minerals, precious gemstones and metals. We might observe with wonder these mountains ground down to soil and sand, becoming the dust of desert plains and swirling in the gusts of sandstorms. If we could but zoom out far enough using time-lapse, we could witness marvelous creation unfold. Were we to observe from the inside 1 cubic centimeter of the human body, knowing nothing of the existence of the entire body and of the man himself, then the phenomena going on in this little cube of flesh would seem like elemental phenomena in inanimate nature. Phenomena are divided for us into living and mechanical. Visible objects are divided into organic and inorganic. The latter are partitioned without resistance, remaining as they were before. It is possible to break a stone into halves and there will still be 2 stones. But if one were to cut a snail into 2 parts, then there would not be 2 snails. This means that the psyche of a stone is very simple and primitive, so simple that it may be fractured many times without a change of state. But a snail consists of living cells, and each living cell is a complex being, considerably more intricate than that of a stone. The body of a snail possesses the power to move, to nourish itself, feel pleasure and pain, seek the first and avoid the last, but most important of all, it possesses the faculty to multiply, to create new forms similar to itself, to involve inorganic substance within these forms, subduing physical laws to its service. A snail is a complex center of transmutation of some physical energies into others. This center possesses a consciousness of its own, and it is for this reason that the snail is indivisible. Its psyche is infinitely higher than that of a stone. The snail has the consciousness of form, i.e. the form of a snail is conscious of itself, while on the other hand, the form of a stone is not conscious of itself. In non-organic nature, wherever we see life, it is not so easy to assume the existence of psyche. In the snail, however, a living creature, we readily admit a certain kind of psyche, but life belongs not alone to separate individual organisms. Anything indivisible is a living being. Each cell within an organism is a living being, and it must have a certain psychic life. Each combination of cells having a definite function is a living being also. Another higher combination, the organ, is a living being no less and possesses a psychic life of its own. Indivisibility in our sphere is the sign of a definite function. If a given phenomenon in our plane is a manifestation of that which exists on another plane, then on our side evidently, indivisibility corresponds to individuality on that other side. Divisibility on our side shows divisibility on that side. The rationality of the divisible can express itself in a collective non-individual reason only. Even a complete organism is merely a section of a certain magnitude of what we might call the life of this organism from birth to death. We can imagine this life as a body of 4 dimensions extended in time. The three-dimensional physical body is merely a section of the four-dimensional body or linga sharira. The image of a person that we know, their personality is also simply a section of that true personality which undoubtedly has its separate psychic life. Therefore we may assume in humankind three psychic lives. The psychic life of the body, which manifests itself through instinct and in the constant function of the body. Our personality, a complex and constantly changing I which we know and in which we are conscious of ourselves. A consciousness of all life, a greater and higher I. In our state of development these three psychic lives know one another only very imperfectly, communicating in trance states, in ecstasy, in sleep, in hypnotic and in mediumistic states, i.e. in other states of consciousness. Perhaps, through practice in lucid dreaming, in addition to our own psychic lives with which we are indissolubly bound but which we do not know, we are surrounded by various other psychic lives that we do not know either. These lives we often feel, because they are composed of our lives. We enter into these lives as their component parts, just as into our life enter different other lives. These lives are good or evil entities, positive or negative, either helping to improve our quality of life or precipitating evil. Family, group, clan, caste, nation or race, any aggregate to which we belong, such an aggregate undoubtedly possesses a life of its own. Any group of individuals having a separate function but feeling some inner connection and unity, such as a philosophical school, a church congregation, a sect, a Masonic order, a society and a political party etc., is undoubtedly a living being possessing a certain rationality. A nation, a people is a living being. Humanity is a living being also. This is the grand man, Adam Kadmon of the Kabbalists, where Adam Kadmon is a being living in men, uniting in himself the lives of all men. Upon this subject, H.P. Blavatsky in her work, The Secret Doctrine, Volume 3, page 146 has this to say: "It is not the Adam of dust, of chapter 2 who is thus made in the divine image, but the divine androgen of chapter 1 Adam Kadmon. Adam Kadmon is humanity or humankind, Homo sapiens, the Sphinx, i.e. the being with the body of an animal and the face of a Superman." End quote. Entering as a component part into different great and little lives, man himself consists of an innumerable quantity of great and little eyes. Many of his eyes living within him do not even know one another, just as those who live in the same house or apartment building may not know one another. Expressed in terms of this analogy, it may be said that man has much in common with a house filled with the most diverse inhabitants. Or better still, he is like some great ocean liner or cruise ship on which are many transient passengers, each going to their own place for their own purpose, each uniting in themselves the most diverse elements. Each separate unit in the population of this passenger manifest orientates themselves involuntarily, and unconsciously regards himself as the very center of the ship. This is a fairly true presentation of a human being. Perhaps it would be more correct to compare a man with some little separate place on earth, living a life of its own, with a forest lake filled with the most diverse life, reflecting the sun and the stars, but hiding in its depths some incomprehensible phantasm, perhaps an undine, or a water sprite. If we abandon analogies and return to facts, as far as these are accessible to our observation, it then becomes necessary to begin with several somewhat artificial divisions of the human being. The old division into body, soul and spirit has in itself a certain authenticity, but leads often to confusion because when such a division is attempted, disagreements immediately arise as to where the body ends and where the soul begins, where the soul ends and where the spirit begins, and so forth. There are no strict limits at all, nor can there ever be. In addition to this, confusion enters by reason of the opposition of body, soul and spirit, which are recognized in this case as inimical principles. This is also entirely erroneous, because the body is the expression of the soul and the soul the expression of spirit. The very terms body, soul and spirit need explanation, however. The body is the physical body with its, to us little understood, mind. The soul, the psyche studied by the science of psychology, is reflected activity that is guided by impressions, received from the external world and from the body. The spirit comprises those higher principles which guide or under certain conditions may guide soul life. Thus a human being contains within itself the following three categories. First, the body, the region of instincts and the inner instinctive consciousness of different organs, parts of the body and indeed the entire organism. Second, the soul, consisting of sensations, perceptions, conceptions, thoughts, emotions and desires. Third, the region of the unknown, consciousness, will and the one indivisible I, i.e. those things that in ordinary man exist in potential only.